if you'll allow me, I'll open with a prayer. Father, we do thank you for this day and the blessings you've given us. Father, we thank you for this beautiful city that we all love. Please give us patience and cooperation as we deliberate and consider tonight's agenda. Please be with those who are ill and those who have experienced loss. We ask all these things in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
I'll call the meeting to order, and if you'll rise for the pledge, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We'll begin with our work session. Items included under work session are intended to provide opportunities for City Council to study and discuss various issues and gather and analyze information. City Council will not take formal action on matters presented at a work session, but may direct staff to place items relating to the matter on future agendas for formal consideration. So we'll begin with A, receive a presentation and hold a discussion regarding new planning and zoning policy changes regarding zoning applications and meetings. City Planner.
All right, thank you, Mayor. Elena Helton, City Planner. So tonight, we're just going to be giving City Council an update on some recent policy changes that the Planning and Zoning Commission has made. Give us just one moment while we pull this up on the screen. Oh, no. All right. Can you see it on your screen? Yes. All right, perfect. All right, so for the last year and a half, the Planning and Zoning Department really has been focused on community engagement and specifically how we can increase and improve neighborhood participation and communication in our zoning process while also maintaining our current levels of customer service in the development community. So during this presentation, we're going to give you a brief overview of some things that we've already implemented based on feedback from the City Council from last year, and then some recent policy changes that we recently implemented based on feedback from the Planning and Zoning Commission. And so on your screen, you see a list of items that were implemented based on City Council feedback in January of 2021. Those include doing a better job of getting the word out whenever we have a zone change application that's being considered by Planning and Zoning Commission and City Council, and just creating more neighborhood awareness. So our zoning code and the local government code requires us to send written letters to property owners within 200 feet of a property that's subject to a zone change request. That also includes a specific use permit or a planned development district. And we increase those by 500 feet. So we still send out a written letter and a return form to property owners within 200 feet. We also send out a courtesy postcard, a little FYI, to property owners within 500 feet, letting them know the date of the meetings, giving them our contact information if they have any questions that they can reach out. If there's an established HOA or neighborhood association in that area, we also send that HOA a letter. We also place large zoning signs on the property that have reflective material. So if someone is just casually passing by, they can actually see the sign without having to get a letter in the mail. We've actually got a lot of feedback and context just based on the zoning sign alone. And then also additional notices on our website and social media pages. So we post the information on our planning and zoning website. We also post it on our Facebook and Nextdoor apps. So the people who don't necessarily get their mail regularly, if they follow us on social media or if they go to our website, they can always find the information there. So those are some things that we have been doing for the past year and a half. And we have seen an increase in contacts and attendance to our meetings. But one of the things that we noticed is one of the main things that come up during our Planning and Zoning Commission meetings are questions or confusion about the project itself or the intent of the applicant in regards to the zoning proposal, and a general lack of communication between neighbors and the applicant. And so the Planning and Zoning Commission asked us to take a look at different things that we could do to increase direct communication between the neighbors and the applicant up front, to allow opportunities to ask for any questions, to clear up any miscommunication, and just allow for more collaboration on the front end to just create a better product and result. So one of those things is a neighborhood meeting. And so this is a meeting where the applicant meets with the neighbors prior to even submitting an application. And the city provides a venue, we provide the notices, and it just creates a space for neighbors to openly ask questions, the applicant to answer, to create a place for conversations about the concerns with the development, maybe possibly get feedback on any changes that could be made to the development based on those concerns, Also creates an opportunity for staff to hear that input up front, so we can make an informed decision and recommendation when we're presenting it to Planning and Zoning Commission and City Council. And sometimes these may even result in the applicant not even moving forward with the project because they know up front that there's not a lot of support from the neighborhood. So it can reduce overall cost and time for the applicant and staff. And so one of those things, as far as the top bullet point, so pre-application conference, that's a meeting that the city provides free of charge for anyone who wants to come in and talk to the city about any development or project that they may have. It could be a proposal for a zone change application. It could be a proposal for a brand new retail center. It could be a proposal for a storage shed in the back of someone's home. And so we have meetings for projects that range large and small. These are an opportunity for people to get questions answered up front about our process, about our fees, before they even hire an architect or engage an engineer and spend money up front putting together a plan. And so these application conferences are where we would tell someone, hey, you have to have a neighborhood meeting for this application. Right now, our zoning ordinance recommends that these neighborhood meetings take place before a zoning change, but they're not required. So this would actually be an ordinance amendment that we would take forward and bring you guys at a later date. It could actually be that we just remove that language altogether to allow more flexibility for staff whenever we're looking at requiring pre-application conferences. But right now, because our zoning ordinance highly recommends it, it's an option. We can't mandate it unless we amend that ordinance. So we'll talk more about that in just a minute. The third item you see is additional Planning and Zoning Commission meetings. So right now, the Planning and Zoning Commission, they meet once a month, the second Monday. And we don't have any other meetings unless it's a special meeting for a special circumstance. But one of the concerns was that if we are requiring these neighborhood meetings up front, then that could possibly delay the project, which in the development world, time is money. And so talking about maintaining that current level of customer service while providing for the additional neighborhood input, by adding a second meeting of the month, that provides additional flexibility for staff in order to notice for these meetings, allows us flexibility in managing these agendas. We're not trying to pack several items into one meeting, and just provides much more flexibility overall for staff, for the applicant, and moving these projects forward while getting as much upfront feedback from the neighbors as possible. So those are the three items that were discussed with the Planning and Zoning Commission. We've already implemented the neighborhood meetings and the additional Planning and Zoning Commission meetings. And again, the pre-application conferences, those will be an ordinance amendment that we'll bring forward to you probably later next month. So these won't apply to all zone changes. The first slide where we looked at the increase in notices that council approved last year with the 500-foot notices and the signs, those apply to all zone change applications regardless of what type of zone change that you're submitting. These changes that we're talking about today with the neighborhood meetings and the second meetings for the Planning and Zoning Commission would only apply to planned development districts, which do tend to have a higher impact on the neighborhood because they're usually proposing something that's a little bit more intense than what would be allowed in any other zoning districts, and something unique in character that should take into consideration the existing pattern of the property around it. Specific use permits are also subject to this requirement. So specific use permits, again, they don't change the zoning, but they allow for a use that's more intense than what would normally be allowed. And so it's important to take into consideration existing development patterns and potential impacts on the neighborhoods. And then zone changes from single family to multifamily or single family to commercial, and then increases by 2 or more zoning districts. So if someone were taking a piece of property that was zoned R1 and they were skipping from R2 to R3, or any other scenario where you're increasing the zoning district by 2 or more categories, that would be one that would be subject to the required neighborhood meeting and pre-application conference. I think there's someone selling ice cream outside. I know. It's making me hungry. Maybe drink some water. So this is just a text from our zoning ordinance that actually talks about that pre-application conference that I mentioned. It recommends it, it's encouraged. So because the ordinance specifically has language that speaks to it, we can't mandate it. So we need to amend that, either take it out altogether or add language that says that it's required for certain types of zoning applications. So I just wanted to provide a little excerpt from the actual zoning ordinance. And this is under our zone change process in the ordinance. Talk a little bit more about the neighborhood meetings. So again, these would be meetings that would be conducted prior to the applicant even submitting an application. We would send out postcards to property owners within 500 feet. This is the same template that we use for our current process. So anyone who would get a postcard within zone change was actually submitted, they would get a similar postcard letting them know, hey, we're gonna have a neighborhood meeting. This is your opportunity to make your opinions known about this potential proposed project. We would provide a venue and coordinate the time, and then provide a 10-day notice to people who were interested in attending, and this would be an applicant-led meeting. So staff, we're gonna provide the location, the space, the notices, but it will be an applicant-led meeting to allow that collaboration and questions, and the staff would be on hand to act as a resource, to answer questions about our process, about the impacts of the development, and then to take notes and document that feedback that we get from the neighborhood if the zone change is move forward. And so, again, currently, the Planning and Zoning Commission, they meet the second Monday of the month. This additional meeting would take place on the fourth Monday of the month if needed. So if we didn't have any zone change applications that would fall into that category that I talked about, we just simply would not have that meeting. Again, this provides more flexibility in managing agendas, so we're not having to pack a bunch of a zone change request into one meeting. This also allows for a reduction in any project delays that might occur from requiring this neighborhood meeting up front, because we may have a neighborhood meeting and then the developer may find that they have to go back to the drawing board and change their proposal or change their application altogether. So this does allow for some flexibility in the final actual approval, which would be city council, and it reduces administrative burden by reducing costs and time associated with applications that aren't likely to actually move forward, with a reduction in overall administrative filing and maintaining records of contacts that we get for when zone changes do get submitted. And I think this would allow for just a much smoother process and much more informed staff report whenever we're making these recommendations to the Planning and Zoning Commission and City Council, because we have that neighborhood input up front, and we're not trying to negotiate at the podium, so to speak. So we did look at some other cities to see if there were some similar requirements, and so we used City of Lufkin, Huntsville, Denton, Bryan, Missouri City, Georgetown, San Marcos, and Plano. And so several of these cities do have 2 P&Z meetings a month. Now, they don't always actually have those meetings. If it's a light agenda or there's nothing to meet about, they often will cancel them. Several of them also do require pre-application meetings for zone changes. Some of them had information on their website about neighborhood meetings, about recommending them, but they weren't required. So this would be something that would be a policy. Again, it's not an ordinance amendment, but it would be policy and it would be required for certain types of zone change applications, not all of them. And so just to recap, the changes include neighborhood meetings, as well as pre-application conferences required for those zone changes that we talked about. The pre-application conference, again, would require an ordinance amendment because our ordinance already says that it's recommended and not required. 2 P&Z meetings a month if needed, depending on the submission rate that we have. And then we've already implemented this, so all these policies have been implemented April 1st. And again, once the ordinance comes forward for the pre-application conference, we'll be implementing that. That is to say that we never have a zone change application that we don't know about. So there is always some sort of pre-application conference with an applicant, whether they're asking questions about the process or what would be supported by staff. And so just because we don't have a formal pre-application conference with all the different staff members, we always are in communication with people prior to submittal and walking them through that process. And so we don't see the first one really being an issue. But we think the neighborhood meetings are really going to increase collaboration and productivity in the process overall, and hopefully create for a better product in result for the developer and the neighbors whenever we're looking at these different zoning proposals. So with that, I'll conclude and open it up for questions from the council.
Okay, is there any comments from the public? See Mr. Deppish there. Do you have any thoughts or just available for questions or? Okay.
Hello, Council. Ken Deppish. I'm the chairman of the Planning and Zoning Commission. I came just in case you had any questions about these changes. They were, I'm not misstating if I say they were unanimously supported by the Planning and Zoning Commission. We'd rather not have 2 meetings a month. We don't want to live the council life necessarily, but it becomes necessary when things are busy to be more flexible. We want to be responsive to the needs of developers and people that are looking to make changes. And sometimes operating on a compressed timeline was creating some difficulties in getting a full packet for a hearing and getting a full response from the community. Also, the neighborhood meetings, I was able to attend the first one, was that last week? I think those are going to be very helpful. One of the issues, and I'm sure you can sympathize with this, is this is not a good environment to have question and answer for the person asking for a zone change or asking for an ordinance change or asking for anything from other members of the community, because all the comments have to be directed to the dais. And it was creating some difficulties in our planning and zoning meetings when it was clear that there needed to be some discussion in a similar setting, but one that was a more open discussion between the applicant and members of the community. And I think that's going to be very helpful and probably lead to overall a smoother process, which is what we're hoping. So we're happy about these changes, and if you have any feedback or thoughts on any of them, please, we're always looking to get better and be more responsive to the needs of the community.
Great, we appreciate what you do. Anyone else in the public comment? Ken, we may want you, yeah, we'll okay. Council, any questions for Elena or for Mr. Deppish? Jay, you want to start?
I don't particularly have any questions. I do like the proposed changes, and I guess those have already been implemented. And I think those go a long way towards being responsive to a lot of the concerns. And so thank you for doing all the research and making that happen.
Thank you.
Ms. Fisher?
Just out of curiosity, you said the pre-application meetings are going to be a creature of ordinance, but the neighborhood meetings are a creature of policy. And my
Yes.
question is why?
So because our ordinance specifically cites pre-application conferences and specifically as language that says that they're recommended and encouraged, we can't make a policy that contradicts that. And so if the ordinance was silent, then we could implement that as a policy, but because our ordinance actually speaks to it and has language that makes it not mandated, then we have to either remove that language altogether or change it. So that's why.
And what are the potential downsides, if any, of making the neighborhood meetings ordinance tied versus policy?
It just provides some flexibility, because right now we're just doing it for certain types of zone changes. So the specific use permits, plan development districts, changes from single family to multifamily and commercial, and then the ones that skip. By not mandating it, we have the flexibility by adding additional types of zoning to that. And so, it makes it easier, so you don't have to go back and make an ordinance amendment every time you want to make a tweak to the process. And maybe once we have implemented this for a while and we can work out some kinks and we know, okay, this is a good process, these are the zone changes that we want to be subject to this, then maybe we can look at making it an ordinance. But I think it'd be good to have at least 6 months to a year to kind of see how everything works, see if any issues arise, and then we can make it permanent.
That makes a lot of sense. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Yes, sir, Mr. Bowden.
Thank you. Neighborhood meetings, I'm totally in agreement with that. And I know it's only for being, a notice is sent out to the 500 feet. But I think the council members could get more involved and because the whole neighborhood most likely have an interest in every applications that's being submitted. So I also think that the council members also should be involved in notifying their constituents. So,
Okay.
but when you receive an application now, how far in advance have you been receiving them?
It varies. Usually we're working with that applicant prior to submittal. And so we may tell them, they may let us know, hey, we want to submit next month. And then we'll let them know, hey, here's the deadline. And so normally it's a couple of weeks prior to the deadline, so we have time to draft the notices and prepare them. a week, maybe two in advance. Sometimes an applicant has to get a signature from a property owner. So maybe we have a part of the application, but not all of it till like the, the day of. So it varies. But for the majority of the time, we're getting them a week or two in advance.
Now, you mentioned that you receive informal applications, and do they go away, or do they submit, some of them submit, or is there a lot of them go away?
We get several inquiries, hundreds a week, about what I can do on this property and what I can build on this property. And oftentimes, the conversation is, well, you can with the zone change, because there's a lot of property in town that's built as one thing but zoned another. And so it creates confusion with, oh, well, there's a single-family house there, well, why can't I build another one? Well, it's actually zoned commercial. And so once they find out there's a zone change required, we'll walk them through that process. And once they realize, the extent of what is required, they'll often forego it and find another property that's already zoned for whatever it is that they want to do. Or depending on the area, we may try to defer them to a more commercialized area. And so it just varies, but we get lots of inquiries that never come to fruition because they're really just doing some preliminary exploration, just trying to figure out generally the process, generally the cost. And so I would say the majority of the time, people are just making inquiries, and about 10% actually come forward for zone change applications. And these are normally people that we work with on a regular basis, so realtors and developers that are already familiar with our process, and someone approaches them about a project, and then they're vetting that through us, doing their due diligence. But does that answer your question, Councilman Bolden?
Yeah, and thank you for the work you've done, because now this puts more people involved in the process, not only the applicants, but also the citizens themselves. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Sure. Ms. Bellinger?
I have a few questions.
Yes, ma'am.
So at that last neighborhood meeting that you had, that was your trial run, right?
Yes, ma'am.
And did anybody object to the proposal?
No.
So are you assuming that there are no objections because nobody objected?
Not necessarily. We had, the majority of the area was rental property, but of the owner occupied that were notified, half of them showed up and they had general questions, but no one was opposed. And there was a lot of discussion about the impacts. So based on that one, I don't anticipate any negative response, just because the majority of the owner occupied properties were present and asked questions and didn't have any concerns.
Okay, so I'd like to just be really careful with our
Okay.
understanding about that. Just because nobody said they had any opposition doesn't mean that they didn't have opposition. And just because nobody spoke up against it doesn't mean that no one was opposed. And even as you're discussing it, and you're saying no one was opposed, we don't know that. And part of it is because when people come to these meetings, they are there to learn, and they're there to think about it, and they will go out and talk to their neighbors, and they'll say, wait a minute, I don't want this, but I don't want to say it at a meeting led by the person who's making the proposal. And I may need to find out more when we leave here. So I just want to be
Yeah.
very, very cautious about assuming that if they don't speak at that meeting, that there's no opposition. So it would be interesting. Before we go forward, I would really like to see what happens at the Planning and Zoning Committee meeting with that neighborhood meeting. So
And
just to follow up,
um,
will they have lost any of their rights? If is it like, you better speak up right now, because when they get to Planning and Zoning, well, Mr. Depish there say, well, why didn't you speak up? I was sitting there, and there's kind of an assumption there that they should have spoken at that meeting. Maybe I don't know. I just know how people are. They tend not to speak like that. Go ahead. I didn't mean to.
So now I can answer a couple of your questions. So we also provide index cards at the meeting. So for those who don't feel comfortable to speak openly, they can provide their comments in written form and submit those to staff. provide any questions. We stay late for people who just want to talk to staff one-on-one. We provide handouts of our zoning process and let them know there's been no application submitted. And once a formal application has been submitted, they'll receive another letter with a response form, giving them a time of notice and date. They'll have an opportunity to speak in a public forum. So staff goes through that process as part of that meeting. So it is applicant-led as far as questions regarding the proposal, but staff does take time to talk through the process, future meetings, future notifications, their opportunity to speak again in front of Planning and Zoning Commission and Council. So they walk away with a lot of information about what's going to happen in the future and additional opportunities for public comment. We give them our contact cards, and so they're leaving with a lot more than just a map. And so, to answer your question, no, they won't lose any rights or privileges as far as opportunities to present information or make comments at public hearings. And we let them. We're very clear about that when we're meeting with them at these neighborhood meetings.
Well, let me clarify. I think it's a great idea. I don't mean, I think it's a great idea to have the neighborhood meetings. I was struck that nobody else had them, of all the people we compared to. And I just want for us to be very, very aware that people may come to this for information gathering and not to express their opposition. And sometimes they won't even think of their opposition until after they leave the meeting. So I just want us to be very, very careful not to have penalties if they did not speak up at that meeting. That's really what my concern is. But I really, really appreciate the work. I appreciate and I don't know that there's anything else you could do. I mean, I know you're giving comment cards, but people are people, and they may do that. The other question is, are those cities that you listed there, are they normal cities we can compare ourselves to, or?
Yes, ma'am. I did find some other cities that do require neighborhood meetings, but they had a much larger population. So I wasn't sure if it was really comparing apples to apples as far as demographics and characteristics. So there are other cities that do require neighborhood meetings, but they're not necessarily, comparable to our community as far as size, character, and things like that. But this is things that other cities do.
Oh, I understand that.
Yes, ma'am.
So I wouldn't, and based on those concerns, I would remain encouraging these. And there may be other ways that neighbors can, I think it also encourages not just the meeting, but encourages the opening of a dialogue too. And I think one of the things that you all have done very well is making sure that it's public information, that nothing is under the table, and that's really helpful. So I don't mean it as any kind of discouragement. I just mean it as I wouldn't want to make that assumption just from that meeting. And I wouldn't want to have it as a requirement personally, just because it puts a different kind of pressure, I think. But anyway, that's it. And it's I appreciate your work. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I think what you're doing is great. I appreciate the additional communication. I think that's very important that we are open and show people what's going on, give people time to talk amongst themselves. It's difficult in here when we have opposition that wants to talk to the applicant. So I think what you're doing is a great thing. And Mr. Depish, thank you for your willingness to work and to even have an additional meeting if necessary. So thank you. We appreciate you.
Thank you.
Okay, we will move on to B, receive a presentation, hold a discussion, and give staff direction regarding amendments to chapters 1874 and 86 of the Code of Ordinances to update and consolidate alcohol regulations. Community Services Director.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. Brian Bray, your Community Services Director. I'd like to spend a few minutes this evening, and probably not too much of your time, but talk about two ordinances that we have currently in place that deal with alcohol or consumption and sale of alcohol in public facilities, and also go over a proposed amendment that does away with those two existing ordinances and creates a new one. And the question that before some of you wise folks would ask, probably the first thing is, why now? Why are we doing this today? Is there something that triggered this? We had concerts last summer. We have a concert coming up at the end of this month. We've had Wine Swirl for I don't know how many years in a row, but we just closed out another very successful event. So far, we haven't had anything that really triggered this until an event that you heard a proposal on for closing of Main Street, the Old Town Rig Down, coming up in September. And oftentimes what happens is staff gathers and we try to kind of shoot holes and figure out how best to provide services to these events. And one of the questions that came up was, well, what happens if they want to sell alcohol downtown? So staff got together and along with city attorney, we looked at it and we went, there's a problem. They can't. So then we said, well, how are we doing these other ones? And we realized that we were actually not following our own ordinance. And furthermore, we weren't following what TABC said. Hence why I'm coming before you this evening, is we have been following sort of a standard operating procedure that was conflicting with city ordinance, but was in compliance with TABC. So our current ordinance that we have in place, essentially for chapter 74 is the park section. Essentially says consumption or sale of alcoholic beverages at a city facility is prohibited except Festival Park. So that says the only city facility, City Hall, CVB, Recreation Center, Liberty Hall, all of those parks and other facilities are not allowed to have the sale or consumption of alcohol except Festival Park. And this is a summary of the ordinance. It's more than a page long. But essentially it says if you want to do it in Festival Park, here are the requirements. It requires fencing. It requires a presentation be made to City Council, and so you have the authority to say, yes, this event can proceed, or no, it cannot. Controlled entrance and exit gates. And then, like I said, ultimately an approval from this body. And then the city manager has the ability to institute the type of fencing. So our ordinance has sort of a dual authority. You say ultimately yes or no, and then the city manager is the one who dictates what type of fencing, whether it's a double fence, a single fence, the whole area fenced, etc. And then we have that bottom section, which to the public is kind of confusing, because it says states that it is unlawful for any person to consume alcoholic beverages in any public place within the city, obviously with the exclusion of restaurants, bars, clubs, those types of things. So the general public, when they look at this, go, well, wait a second, I can't do it, but then up here it says I can. So that brings us to kind of our new section. And I'll go through this briefly, and then we'll talk more about that process on the next slide. So this provides a process for the city manager to issue a permit for on-premise, and that's key, for on-premise consumption and sale of alcoholic beverages for a period not to exceed 72 hours. So right now, we don't have any events that are 72 hours long. So that covers us. But then, you know, in a year, 2 years, 5 years from now, we become the music capital of the state, and we have a week-long concert down in Festival Park, well, we can issue multiple permits. Or we can always come back and amend that ordinance should this ordinance be approved this evening. And we also rely heavily on TABC. So it says no permit shall be issued unless liability insurance and compliance with TABC code is followed. And then see those two little words, as amended. You know, TABC code changes quite often. And so we didn't want to reference a specific code in TABC because we might see that it was appealed and another one was adopted next month or the following month. So this puts the onus on following TABC regulations, which TABC trumps city regulations anyway, which is one of the reasons why we are here this evening. And then that following, that last section, we do not currently have a fee in place, but this allows us to come back to you at a future point. This allows us to come back at a future point and ask for you to establish a fee for processing of permits. So once again, today we are not asking you for a fee. We do not have a fee in place. This just provides us an avenue to come back at some future point and ask for one, should we want to. So kind of here is the nuts and bolts of what we've proposed. The process is an event promoter, a planner, fills out an existing festival or special event permit online, and there's simply a box that you check yes or no to. So if it says yes, we would like to serve alcohol at our facility, then that means that staff gathers, and this is police, fire, public works, and parks. So those are kind of the key elements, mainly the public safety group, and then parks, because most of the events are held in parks. And so that group gets together, and we look at the event from times, what is the age range, is there alcohol, everything you can imagine about an event is what we meet and we discuss. And this is, once again, this is the process should this amendment to the ordinance be approved this evening. So we look at it, we discuss it, and then we would make a recommendation to the city manager with, city manager, here, we recommend approval of this event with these 5 stipulations. Fire department may say, this is an event that has 5,000 people, and we really feel the need to have a roving EMS crew. Okay, so great, then now we have a roving EMS crew. PD may come back and say, normally we have 1 officer for this type of event, but we really think that we need 3. Okay, great, that's a requirement. So whatever those requirements are, and I can't even begin to give you all of those examples, but those are just a few of them, that would then go to the city manager's office. City manager then writes a memo. We actually would present that to the city manager with, these are the requirements, and then if approved, would sign off on it, and that goes to TABC. Then what that is doing is that is giving the event planner permission to use city facility to TABC so they can issue the permit, because they won't issue the permit unless we do so. So that's essentially the process that we followed for Wine Swirl. So city manager writes a memo to TABC and says, Jessica Sal, Main Street Department, has the authority to operate the sale of alcohol on city facilities. TABC issues the permit, then she's approved. So not intentionally going against our ordinance, that's just the way it had been done for years, and so that's the way we've continued to do so. So here's a little comparison between that section 74, which is existing, and then that section 18, which is proposed. So allows for sale of alcohol in city facilities, yes, with the exception of Festival Park is the only one. Proposed ordinance, any city facility. A permit required, yes, there are different processes, but a permit is still required, that still requires staff and city manager review. Controlled access points, yes and no, depending on what type of event it is. We may not need controlled access points. If alcohol is going to be sold and it's a really large event, then PD would probably say, yes, we need that, and that could be a requirement. Final approval by city council. Under our current ordinance, you are the only ones that can approve or deny. Under the proposed ordinance, we're proposing that the city manager be the one who says, yes, TABC, you can issue them a permit. Final approval by city manager. City manager still had a review process in the existing ordinance and would continue to have review process in the proposed ordinance. And then that last one I think is the most important. Our current ordinance is not in compliance with TABC. The new ordinance is in compliance with TABC. And how this would be put into practice here locally. So all of these events, concert and festival park, current process, proposed process, it's still allowed under both avenues. The rest of these, the first one being sort of a hypothetical, wedding at Zion Hill, it will happen at some point, we just haven't had one yet. But if we were to follow our current ordinance, if you were to have a wedding reception, you wanted to serve wine at Zion Hill, you're not allowed. It's a city facility. And then the other one's Wine Swirl, Alive After 5 at the CVB, Knack Snack Food Truck, Literary Ball at the Public Library. All of those are not allowed under our current ordinance, but would be allowed through a review process under the proposed ordinance. So Mayor, I'd be happy to answer any questions you or council may have and hopefully hear some feedback on our proposal this evening.
Okay. Is there anybody in the public that would like to speak or comment regarding this? Okay. Council, Mr. Bolden?
Thank you, Mayor. I'm basically in agreement with all of the information you've given us, except wedding reception events at Zion Hill. Zion Hill is a sacred location, not Zion Hall, where you can have parties and et cetera. This is our history, and it's a location that was for families, and that's where we got in tune with God. It is a sacred location, and I adamantly oppose drinking at Zion Hill. It is not Zion Hall. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Ms. Bellinger?
I have several questions. It's a church. I fully agree with you, Mr. Bolden. It's a church, and perhaps other facilities around it or something else, because I assume they had picnics outside and they had other things, but not in the church.
Mayor, I was just, that is not something that we were proposing. I was just trying to give a different example of a museum. And so I apologize for using that one as the example. I should have listed Durst Taylor Museum. And so we were trying to list just something that we may not think about, but was a city facility. And so I apologize.
Thank you.
This does bring up the question I did have, and that's, I had two basic questions. One is there is a lot of discretion in here to, you know, and there's a lot of, without people's input, there's a lot of room for problems. You know, you wouldn't have to come to us, and you might assume that that might be fine, and then go ahead and issue a permit to have it at a location that people don't agree with, or they find offensive, or do people, it's just a whole lot of discretion. I'm a little bit concerned about any liability the city might have. It's just wide open. Any liability that we might have if, for example, we allow a permit for, you know, everyone from Denton, you know, who's selling alcohol from Denton, but we're not allowing this other person who might think it's because of where the person came from or something. Do you see what I'm saying? All kinds of things, you know, it might be, we don't. There are just a lot of reasons to deny a permit, and then would people come back to us and say, wait a minute, you denied this, or you required us to have 5 police officers and the charge is this, whereas, you know, it doesn't seem like there's much to limit the discretion on it.
So this essentially follows the way we have done all of our events that excluded alcohol. So kind of take alcohol off the table. If there's an event that is proposed, the SFA Art and Music Festival that we just recently had. So that's something that same group, police, fire, public works, parks department, sit down with the CVB, which is the event venue, or the event host, and staff comes up with recommendations for, this is how we provide the best public safety. Is that, so if there's, and I know Lieutenant Nick Stewart, sorry, I drew a blank on his name right there, I apologize. He's in the back, and he's the PD rep who looks at those. And so if you have questions about, you know, how PD looks, I know that's just an example, but if you have questions about kind of how PD looks at those things, it's purely from a public safety standpoint.
So are we going to allow for-profit? I mean, some of these are kind of nonprofit events, or the profits will go to a nonprofit. Are we going to allow a for-profit, for example, organization to run something? To me, that when you have the alcohol, and I'm not in opposition, I'm just saying that's something to consider. And you can, because it's wide open right now, and there's a lot of room for a lot of.
So the process we have in place is kind of the same. So we've had concerts years ago in the park that was a for-profit group that still, they sold alcohol, and we still went through the process of permitting it. It was just a different process, but it was still a process for approval, and it didn't take into account whether it was for-profit or nonprofit.
Okay, so, and do you see having alcohol sales then, when, on the Knack Snack Fridays, at lunch, at dinner, do you see?
I'm not the one who puts those together, but I know that
Mary's in the morning on?
but in previous Knack Snack events, they did give away beer. And so that's the reason that was listed as one of the events that has taken place, that didn't follow our ordinance, but went ahead and had the consumption. And so this would allow a review process to say yes or no to that.
Okay, it doesn't, how long have y'all been discussing this, maybe I should ask Mr. Canizares, but how long
Mr. Kirkland?
have we been discussing this? And
Mr. Kirkland and I started talking about it, and I'm looking at him, his better memory than I do.
You're sadly mistaken on that last statement. I think we talked about it for
It's several months, but I don't remember an exact.
5 minutes a month for the last 3 months.
so for the last 3,
We've not had a long sit-down discussion. We've had
yeah.
15 minutes here, 30 minutes there.
So several people have called me with a lot of different questions, which I can't answer because, you know, we haven't really talked them through. And we only had 4 days to look at this. But you've had 3 months to discuss and think through some of these things. I am asking that these things be given to us well ahead so that we can give them to our constituency, because several people are very concerned about, We have a history in the town of some people being concerned about alcohol consumption at different times. We need to just give them a little more lead time to allow them.
You can have all the time you need, you just table the motion or table consideration of the ordinance, but you need to hear the ordinance before you get to that.
Or else say, this is something we're considering, if you have thoughts or questions, maybe we can think about it, as we look at our ordinance. But maybe,
Your
we
current
will-
process doesn't comply with TABC, so we have to do something. So we have to initiate something. This is the initiation. If you like what you see, we can proceed. If you don't, then we hold and let you do what you need to do. Am I missing something?
Nope.
Okay.
Councilwoman, we did not have this ordinance 3 months ago. And I think I see where you're headed with that is, over the last several months, we've tried to develop an ordinance so that we could come and present it. So Mr. Kirkland and I didn't have what you see in front of you this evening when we first started talking. It was more of, here's a problem. How do we get into compliance with TABC with still providing a lot of review authority so that we can then make sure that it's a safe event? And so that then led us to this.
So this is really just a general issue, that when something gets on the agenda and we have 4 days to, wait a minute, what is this? How do I react? How do I even read it? How do I compare this with the other ordinance? I'm just asking for more time. That's all I'm
Yes,
asking
ma'am.
for, even for things that, particularly on things that may have a public reaction. Just a little more time on agenda items that's coming down the pike or whatever. That's all. That's all my comments.
Thank you. Ms. Fisher?
Seems like, given that our current ordinance is not in compliance with TABC, that we need something rather quickly regardless. I mean,
Not necessarily. TABC, it preempts local regulation on this. So the ordinances that we have are simply just not enforceable.
okay. So if we have a request for a permit to sell alcohol at an event prior to our adopting an ordinance that actually is in compliance with TABC, what would that look like? The sort of case-by-case basis that you just described, Mr. Bray?
So I'll answer one of them and let Mr. Kirkland answer the broader one. So for the concert in Festival Park, that process is in place. So we have a process for approving the sale of alcohol and consumption of alcohol in Festival Park, but not any of the others, and I'm not sure what Mr. Kirkland's.
So I believe TABC would require them to get some kind of permission from us to do it. So it comes back to us to do an ad hoc permission-based thing. They don't look at what our permission process looks like. So this would actually provide a more regularized and standardized approach to which we could then add the value judgments that people want to make on should it be at this place or that place or during these hours or for this type of festival organizer or not. And then we could debate the further ramifications of those choices. Right now, we have nothing.
Okay. Ultimately, all requests end up going to TABC after going through us, be it city council or the manager. Is that right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And so they have the final say, period, on
Yes.
whether there's an
'Cause
alcohol
they
permit
can
issued.
choose to not issue the permit to that vendor for the sale at the event that we are proposing.
Okay. And then my other question, because I'm kind of trying to wrap my head around a concern that Councilmember Bellinger cited regarding there being a lot of discretion, and I'm trying to envision what an ordinance that doesn't have a lot of discretion in this, having to do with this subject matter would actually look like. And so my question is whether in coming up with this proposal, either of you looked at other city ordinances, if this looks similar to other city ordinances, if there are other alcohol city ordinances that are more specific, regarding, I mean, I'm trying to envision what an
The-
ordinance?
The ordinances that I reviewed and passed along to Mr. Kirkland for his consideration, and then I know he looked at others as well, were very similar to this one, that said there is a review process that staff, city manager's ultimate authority to say yes or no to go on to TABC, and it lists things such as the public safety. Because that's how all other events are reviewed, is that same internal network.
Yes,
So that covered the ones he looked at as well.
okay. Yeah,
I also have the experience with the City of Houston's ordinance, which is way more in-depth, way more involved, way more convoluted, and yet still somehow has a great amount of discretion allotted to the director of that department. I'm not sure how you get there without shutting down the entire process. There's got to be discretion, there's got to be back and forth, there's got to be somebody's got to make the decision, and that person's got to have some room.
In our current ordinance, and I don't have the full one on the screen because it was too long, it was in your packet, and it was shown as the sort of red lined, or in this copy, the black line. There aren't a lot of requirements in the existing ordinance, which we already understand that's out of compliance, but to look at the requirement section, a map depicting the following the boundaries of the festival area, we're requiring that under this new process. Location of fencing and type of fencing, this one requires fencing, we're saying that it may or may not need fencing, but if the recommendation is for fencing, it would require a map showing the location. If we require a map for entrance and exit points, that's required here, and then location of alcohol sales. And those are the only real specific requirements in the existing ordinance for events in Festival Park.
okay.
So there was a lot of leeway, what I was saying, is in our existing ordinance, there was a
Right.
lot of leeway even within our current ordinance.
I don't really see a big issue with any of it from my perspective, with what you guys have proposed.
Mr. Anderson?
Yeah, I mean, I will say I have some concern about going into a lot more detail with the ordinance, because you've got different groups, different venues, and as you said, when you get into trying to codify every possible scenario, you end up with something that's so unwieldy as to be almost useless, I would think. And so I think having some policy direction would be a good thing beyond this, but I think the discretion probably needs to be in there to allow for the necessary flexibility for the different venues and for the different groups, different types of events. I don't see how we could possibly foresee every possible scenario and actually codify that in an ordinance. So I have no problem with what has been proposed either.
Okay, yeah, and I agree. I like your team approach. I like bringing in public safety in your group and working with the city manager and city attorney to get it taken care of. So, certainly input that Mr. Bolden gives is good.
Yes, sir.
We want to consider things like that.
Yes, sir.
So,
And, go ahead, please.
Yeah, go ahead, and then I do have a different comment.
Well, Mayor, I was gonna ask if you were open to, us providing a list of those city facilities. And so if there are areas that we may not have thought of, we could hear your feedback and say, I'm not really keen on having something at Eugene Stern Park, just as a random example. And that way then staff would know your feelings towards, because once again, it wouldn't be in the ordinance, but then staff knows sort of that SOP is we don't review events for Eugene Stern Park.
I think that's great.
Well, that leads to my comment, or my question. I don't know what it is, but, so I like the idea of coming back to the public and asking them the things that they would feel comfortable with and things they wouldn't. And the ways to, and it could be a limitation in policy, or not a limitation, but this is our policy for everybody. And there are different variables that you can limit discretion without codifying everything versus having total discretion. So, and I like the way you're saying, let's decide which public facilities. And because right now, anytime, day or night, all throughout the entire city, you know, we could, if theoretically, if you agreed to it, not that you would, I'm not saying you would, but people would say, why can't I have, you know, alcohol? Why can't I now have alcohol after the bars close out on the streets? You know, or something like that. So there are hours, there are places, there are who, selling, buying, those things. I think it would be helpful to have a community discussion about what people would like to have and what they wouldn't like to have. Because the history of the town has, you know, people have been concerned about alcohol consumption, particularly because this is a college town.
Most of those items are already covered under state law, and that's why I have the three amigos in there in the back, because I said I don't even dare to try to answer some of those. But, for instance, we can't, please throw me, Nick, if I'm wrong, but we can't approve an event to have alcohol after stores have already closed selling alcohol. So we are limited by state law for most of this on approving when alcohol can be sold.
But you follow my question here. So, I mean, I think it would just be really helpful to bring that, you know, to the public and get input about their questions and their concerns and their thoughts. And if we don't have it in an ordinance, at least think as you review requests, you know. There's so many things I can't even, you know, I can't imagine, but will be asked of us. So I'd love to see that a little bit more limited. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you,
We
Mayor.
appreciate your presentation. And it is close to 5:30. Is there anyone who wants to speak in open forum? Can you, yes, sir, can you bring that to Ms. Vinson, please? Luke, give us, I'm sorry, I hate to start before 5:30. Okay. It's about 3 minutes.
All right.
Okay, come back, don't leave.
I won't.
Sir? Okay, we'll start our meeting back, and we'll begin with open forum. Mr. Moore?
Thank you. I want to comment. I need to start the timer. I forgot my thing. Last week, y'all had a zoning case that didn't pass. At least I don't think it passed. And I just want to say how much I appreciate the city acting to respect the planning process that we're going through. It's hard to sit up here when the popular thing to do is do one thing and do something else that is in the best interest, in my opinion, of the long-term goals and objectives and benefits of the city. And that's not easy to do. It's really difficult, and we don't appreciate it enough, because part of being a city council member, in my opinion, is to do what the people want, to listen to your constituents and, you know, just carry the water for them. But another huge part of that is to know what is the right thing to do, what is the unpopular thing to do, and make those decisions. And I can promise you, if we ever have any hope of implementing even a small portion of this comprehensive plan, there's going to be a lot of difficult decisions that are going to have to be made. And there's going to be people who don't want to see that. There's going to be land use regulations that are required to be in place because in the long term, they're going to benefit the city. Creek protections, sidewalks, walkability, trees, just a number of different things that our planners are going to tell us about. And they're going to write it all up in a plan, and it's going to be a PDF document that is going to have no teeth. And a little over a year from now, y'all are going to have a meeting up here, and you're going to approve it. And that plan is going to sit here by itself, and it's not going to do anything. The only thing that's going to happen is if we act to create ordinance like y'all are doing on this ordinance right now, changing the ordinance for how neighborhood meetings work, and do other ordinances that are forward-thinking and are designed to implement the plan. So I just want to say how much I appreciate it. And I know a lot of other people I've talked to that aren't really interested in city stuff. You know, they know about it too, and they appreciate it, so that's all I want to say. Thanks.
Thank you, sir. And we also have Mr. Mall.
Hello. Do I need to give you my address and all that?
Just your name would be great.
Brad Mall. The only thing that I got a little concerned about, and I just wanted to ask you about it, was they had that community meeting, the trial one, last week or so, and I heard about it, but I also read the thing and it said that you're not, public is not welcome. So in other words, if I didn't get a letter about that particular place, but I couldn't go to that meeting, that concerns me a little bit, because my concern about zoning is not within 500 feet of my house necessarily, but for the entire city, because there seems to be a lot of rezoning going on right now, up and down, different ways, and that's all cool, I understand it, but I am concerned that what you're doing is diluting the public comment by saying, well, we're gonna have these pre-meetings, but you can't go to it. And so that's my only concern. I think anybody in Nacogdoches should be allowed, if they hear about a rezoning, to attend it, because a lot of people are concerned about the rezoning of the entire city, not just their little house in their neighborhood. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I don't see Elena. Thought we might just understand that, but maybe we can talk about why it would be that way.
You have an item on your agenda to discuss that tonight, I believe, on the plan.
Further down the?
Yes, sir.
Okay, good.
You are correct, I did not. I don't know if she's still here, but I can,
Do you know why that would be excluded?
I don't, sir.
But that's something that we could consider not excluding is,
Absolutely, I mean, certainly I'm not saying the invitation list, but there is a list because it does affect a neighborhood, because you've got to just contact people, but I can't imagine why it couldn't be open to the
I
public.
did see where public officials would not attend, and I assume that's us and P and Z.
Well, actually, what we did for this first one, because we weren't sure who was going to attend from the Planning and Zoning Commission, I asked her to go ahead and post it as a potential public meeting, but no action taken in case there was a quorum of the Planning and Zoning Commission. Because I assumed it was the first one, there may be the chance that at least 3 people would show on the Planning and Zoning Commission. We wanted to make sure we were appropriately posted. That we were appropriately posted.
Elena, I'm getting a little out of whack, but just for a second, a question?
Yes, I heard it, yeah, I heard part of it.
Did you? Yeah. Now, in the neighborhood meetings, why would we not have the public welcome?
They are.
Okay.
So they're actually posted as public meetings.
Uh-huh.
So they're open to anyone who would like to attend. And I'm sorry I'm out of breath because I ran down the stairs. But we only send written notices to those people within 500
500
feet.
feet, right.
Because those are the people who are immediately impacted, but they are open to the public, and whoever would like to come is
Okay.
happy to attend.
Apparently, there was something that led Mr. Mall to believe that that was not the case, and was there something written there that you saw?
It was on the PowerPoint tonight, actually, that she showed. It said no public participation or, board members or public speaking. So it's actually written.
Okay.
The way I saw it.
Okay.
Where?
Well, good point.
Where at?
We will certainly
In the
consider that.
presentation?
Thank you.
But the wording is a little weird, so this is what it says, because I'm reading it. This is
Let's just,
not,
if we can,
Oh,
we'll just work on it. We'll work on that and get that straight. Thanks for pointing that out. Let's move on. We have recognitions. The first of here is a proclamation. And, whereas the monarch butterfly is an iconic North American species whose multi-generational migration and metamorphosis from caterpillar to butterfly has captured the imagination of millions of Americans, and whereas less than 1% of the western monarch population remains, while the eastern population has fallen by as much as 90%. Monarch scientists attribute the population decline to degradation and loss of summer breeding habitat in the U.S. and loss of winter habitat in south central Mexico and coastal California. And whereas we have a critical role to play to help save the monarch butterfly by providing habitats at public parks, median strips, community gardens, schools, and municipal buildings like recreation centers and libraries. and whereas every resident can make a difference for the monarch by planting native milkweed and nectar plants to provide habitat for the monarch and pollinators in locations where people live, work, learn, play, and worship. And whereas our work to help save the monarch butterfly intentionally engages all parts of our communities, ensuring that historically marginalized communities are not left out of the work of the many benefits this work will create. Now therefore be it proclaimed that I, Jimmy Mize, Mayor of Nacogdoches, and on behalf of the City Council, do hereby recognize April 29th, 2022, Mayor's Monarch Pledge Day. And this was requested by their national organization, and I know in the past Mr. Bray has done some work for the butterfly. Any comments?
Yes, Mayor, Brian Bray, your Community Services Director. So we have been I always mess this up. We have taken the Mayor's Monarch Pledge the previous several years, and we have just this last year planted 3 additional butterfly gardens or monarch gardens. One is back here behind City Hall by the 5 historical markers. There's one at the Nacogdoches Railroad Depot, and then we did another one at Moroni or Splashadochis. It's kind of between Moroni Park and Splashadochis. And so yes, sir, we have continued to grow our monarch gardens as part of the Mayor's Monarch Pledge.
Thank you. We
Yes, sir.
appreciate what you do. Okay, we will move forward to the consent agenda. Are there any items to be removed from that agenda? Council, okay. If there are none, do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved?
Move Mr. Anderson. Do I have a second?
Second?
Second, Ms. Bellinger. Okay, any discussion? Those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, same sign. All right, we'll move to the regular agenda. Number 8A, consider approval of resolution number 1300-05-22, amending a Chapter 380 Economic Development Program Agreement by and between the City of Nacogdoches and HCH Aviation LLC regarding development of a flight school at A.L. Mangum Jr. Regional Airport. Economic Development Director.
Mayor and council, you approved a Chapter 380 agreement with HCH Aviation in August of 2021. The budget at that time was $688,000. That was based off of an engineering estimate at the time. In 2021, HCH did request to substitute the storm drainage project for some electrical work that they needed done. You approved that request. In February of 2022, it was right at the time that HCH was getting ready to bid out the septic portion of the project. At the exact same time, the airport office's septic system failed. And so rather than asking HCH to go out, bid a project, construct it, and request reimbursement, we just packaged their septic with the city's septic and pulled it out of the 380 agreement. The city was not out any additional money beyond what would have already been paid out anyway. So that is no longer a part of the 380 agreement. Since then, HCH has completed their electrical work and were reimbursed. That work did come in at $8,000 less than originally budgeted, which is great. HCH completed their water line work, and that reimbursement is currently being processed, and that came in at about $4,000 less than was budgeted. They recently bid the paving portion of their project. If you remember, this was a large parking lot and a driveway and some sidewalks. Those bids came in at about $35,000 over budget, or about 6% of their original budget. Considering the entire project, this was a very large project. It was in a portion of the airport where work had not been done ever, to be honest. There were some conditions that we found on the ground that we weren't anticipating, and so honestly, a 6% overage on the budget is probably commendable considering inflation. The overall impact, if you consider the $12,000 in savings of the other 2 projects, is only 3%. What they are requesting tonight. So tonight they are requesting in this agreement that you reallocate the $12,000 that was not spent on the water line and the electrical line. They're requesting you increase the driveway line item to $584,876 or 6%, and then that would increase the overall 380 agreement by $22,649 or 3%. And I believe we have a representative of HCH in the audience if you have any questions, and he and I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Mr. Hughes, do you have any comments?
We appreciate everything. I need to come up.
Yes, yeah, that'd be great. Tell us kind of about where you are and what's going on.
All right, so it's, I tell everybody it's 100 miles an hour with my tail on fire. It's a lot going on right now. Just a quick update, you know, our inaugural semester was last fall. We kicked off the year with 21 students, 3 airplanes. We just purchased our first multi-engine airplane. It's on site now. We anticipate having 65 to 70 students in this fall and 8 to 10 airplanes. So it's, to say we're growing is an understatement. We're going to triple this next fall. Obviously, we'll be adding staff, you know, appropriately. So it's going exceptionally well. The construction, we're basically ready to move in the hangar. We're waiting on our septic system to get installed. We do have water already there. We have electrical there, obviously. We're already storing airplanes in there. We just aren't officing there yet because we don't have facilities. And so, you know, we appreciate all the city has done, working with us on every turn. And we just can't thank y'all enough. So happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, sir. Is there any comment from the public? Okay. All right. Any questions from council? Comments? Anybody? No?
It's 3% off, it's great, in this times.
Yeah, I think so.
How did you get that driveway and paving in with such a little cost overage?
You know, lots of prayer. Yeah, with, you know, the bids, I guess we had 2 people bid on it, and you know, local contractor won it, and you know, some on the water and that kind of stuff, we pre-bought some stuff and different things, did as much as we could ourselves. We buried a trencher. It's a lot of sand out there we didn't know about, and anyway, but it's been interesting, so.
Okay. We thank you. We appreciate you.
Absolutely. Thank y'all.
being here tonight. Do I have a motion for 8A?
So move.
Move, Ms. Fisher.
Second.
And a second, Mr. Bolden. Any discussion? Okay, those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. All right. We'll move to B. Consider the adoption of a budget amendment in the amount of $610,835 for the amended Chapter 380 Economic Development Program agreement by and between the City of Nacogdoches and HCH Aviation LLC regarding development of a flight school at A.L. Mangum Jr. Regional Airport. Economic Development Director.
This is a cleanup budget amendment that actually should have come with the original 380 agreement, but we are cleaning it up and doing it now, and it does also reflect the current changes you just made. The water line and the septic system come out of CIP funds, so they don't require a budget amendment, so the number you see before you is just the electrical and driveway and paving.
Great, thank you. Any public comment? Okay, any council comment? Okay, do I have a motion for 8B?
So move.
Move, Ms. Fisher.
Second.
Second, Mr. Bolden. Any discussion? Those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. All right, we will move to 8C, receive mid-year financial update, Director of Finance.
Thank you. Mayor, council, tonight we're going to go over our finances as of March the 31st, which is halfway through our fiscal year. If you'll notice in your packet, there was the actual set of financials that goes line item by detail for each revenue item and each expense item. But I just want to kind of hit on the high points. And it's going to look, all I want to talk about tonight is revenues, but I'll explain. We're going to talk about expenses, but I didn't want to have 17 slides that all said the same thing. So let's start with general fund first.
Our revenues in the general fund are made up of course, our property taxes, sales tax, franchise fees, and then other operational general fund items. Property taxes, we're sitting right where we should be, 98% at mid-year. Of course, y'all understand that most of our property taxes come in between December and January, and so we're happy with where we are. That means everybody is paying their property taxes relatively close to on time, and so we're happy that we've gotten 98% of those in. Sales tax, I know every month when y'all get my wonderful email that y'all are so excited. We are up on sales tax and have been all year, so that has been a blessing to this town. We are sitting at about 10% above what we budgeted for the year. Overall, about 18% since last year. So sales tax is doing really, really well right now. Franchise taxes, this number, of course, shows to be only 16%, but remember, we only get the electric franchise fee once a year, and that's on July the 31st. And so for where we are this time each year with cable, gas, and telecom, we're down a little bit, and we'll talk about that on the next slide. So that one is not quite where we want to be, pending the Encore July payment. Court fines, we're sitting about 46%, which is a little bit lower than where we want to be at this point in the year. But you'll see on the next slide, we are above where we were at this point last year. So things are turning around, and we are collecting more of those fines than we did last year. The other revenues is going to be a combination of rec center, cemetery lots, interest, building permits, those types of things, and everything is sitting pretty close to where we expect them to be at this point in the year. I know you're going to see that grants and reimbursements and say, whew, wow. That actually is made up of several fire department items, deployments for fires, deployments. We had them go out on a vaccine deployment last year, so that money came in. We've already started seeing some of the winter storm reimbursements come in from FEMA, so that $529,000 is going to grow a little bit as the remainder of those deployments come in. Understanding though that there is a expense on the other side that because that's basically just a reimbursement for expenditures that we made. So it's not necessarily an increase of our revenues because there is an offset in those expenditures. And then our transfers right where they should be because we do those on a monthly basis. So those are at 50%. So to take a little deeper look at those revenues, comparing them to where we were at this point last year, property taxes is up about 4%. That has to do with some of the new value that we added last year, as well as how people are paying. So I think last year we were at 96.5%, 97% at this point, and so that's just showing how much we've collected more this year than last at this point. Sales tax up 18% over where we were last year, so that is a huge boon for us. We're just all holding our breath that continues on for quite some time, understanding that we all know that at some point we're going to stop seeing those double-digit increases, but for right now, we are enjoying the benefit of that. Now, the franchise fees, we were talking a little bit earlier, that's the one that was 16% because we don't have the electricity yet. We're down about $17,000 over where we were last year, and the majority of that is attributed to cable franchise fees are down significantly for us. We also have franchise fees for gas and for telecom. Those are pretty close to where they should be. It is the cable that is down for us at this point. Fines, you'll see, we're up about $21,000 over what we were last year. Understanding last year was a very, very low year. The last couple of years with COVID, fines have been down. So they're not back to where we want them to be, but they are up over where we were last year. So we're headed in the right direction there. The miscellaneous fees, which is the rec center, the inspections, the interest, we're up there, a double-digit increase, so that's good. Interest earnings, now this is as of March, and we were up over last year, and then as you know, the feds have been raising the rates, and so we're going to continue to see those interest earnings go up, which is a good thing. Understanding the reason that happened, though, is the inflation, so there is expenditures that are going up faster than our interest rates are going up, but we will be making a little bit more on our money in coming years. Now, before we get to the the utility fund, there's not a slide on here for expenditures because normally what it says is how we are, if we're where we should be, where we should not, which ones are not. Everything is where we should be for March the 31st. Our departments have done a really, really good job of staying within the confines of their budget this year. And so there are very few items that are going to be over budget at March the 31st. Most everybody is within, 3 to 5% under their budget at this point. One thing that I will call your attention to is fuel. Now, when we prepared the budget last year, of course, we had no idea that we were going to be paying $3.60 and $4 for fuel this year. And so as of March the 31st, we're up about 15% on fuel cost. And so, I feel like we're going to see that the rest of the year. Right now, though, departmentally wide, everybody is still within where they should be because other items have come in, we haven't spent a lot. So departments are as we move through the second part of the fiscal year, we're gonna ask them to keep an eye on the line items that they can control because we have no control over the fuel. Another thing that is going to be a significant increase is electricity, and we're gonna talk about that in a future, an item coming up here in a minute. There's going to be a significant increase in our electricity cost as well. And so it's going to be imperative that each department takes a hard look at their expenditures and try to save as much as we can to kind of compensate for that. The increases in fuel and electricity are going to be more than we're able to withstand within the current budget. So understand we will be bringing you some mid-year budget adjustments to kind of work on those, but we've got to have some more time. We got to get the new rate approved and in place for us to be able to tell you what that increase is going to be. So let's jump over to utility and sanitation funds, and we do these kind of together because they are, there's not a whole lot of revenue items in utility fund. It's water and sewer sales. At March the 31st, we're right at 49 and 50%, which historically, normally you see a greater percentage of your sales come during the summer months. But the last few years, it has been very wet, and so this is where we've been the last few years, which we're probably maybe 1.5% up from where we were last year at this point, but we did not see a huge bump in sales at the end of summer last year because it was wetter. And so where we are now, we should be fine for the end of the year. If it dries up, then we will for sure make budget, but last year I think we were a couple of percent under on water and maybe 4% under, 5% under on sales. So for right now, we're holding our own. It's just we have to, as we go through this, every quarter we'll come back to you and kind of let you know where we're standing with those sales. Sanitation fees, which this is the portion of your utility bill that is just for the garbage service, the pickup. We're a little bit over where we should be at this point in the year. We have had some additional sanitation accounts that we have a few more this year than we have had in the past, and so that's a good thing. The fuel charges, you'll see at 73%. These are directly tied to our fuel. Several years ago, we pulled the fuel piece out of the sanitation rate because fuel was fluctuating so significantly that what we were charging was not paying our fuel cost. And so now each month what we do is we look at the fuel cost for the garbage trucks that month, and then it's allocated over all of the customers. And so that is up because of course our fuel has been up. So that is directly tied to our consumption on the fuel. So we will exceed budget on that this year. Landfill gate fees, I'm not real sure. They're up about 11% for this point in the year. So I guess maybe people are cleaning up. I don't know. Lots of cleaning. I don't know. So same thing before we leave utility and sanitation. All of their expenditure line items are within where they should be at this point during the year, with the understanding that fuel and electricity is going to be our two areas over the next few months that we are definitely going to have to keep an eye on. Everything else is running within 45 to 50% of budget, so that's good. Hotel tax fund, this is not one of our major funds, but I always like to kind of pull it in since we had such an issue with COVID, and we lost so much in the hotel tax a couple of years ago. This is at March the 31st. We're right at 47% of budget. So this year's budget was kind of a shot in the dark. We weren't real sure how much we knew we were on the upswing after COVID. We just weren't real sure where we were. So I think we're probably okay because we're coming into some of the summer months and the festivals, and hopefully people are coming to town, and so hopefully that we'll see this continue. I'm not real worried at this point over the hotel tax. It is up a little bit over last year, not significantly. And then, of course, the hotel tax expenditures are just a direct payment to the CVB at 72.5% of this. So they're very stable. So those don't fluctuate a lot. They just go with the revenues. So that's pretty much the major points of the mid-year financials. Nope, sorry.
Any questions for Ms. Carbo?
I just want to say thank you so much. That's really helpful how you present it and summarize it. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
You're gonna keep that sales tax going the way it has been,
Ooh,
right?
I hope so. I hope so.
All right, if there's nothing else. Thank
That's
you.
it. Thank you.
We will move to D, receive an update on customer service inspections for commercial entities and backflow preventer testing and installations. Public Works Director.
Mayor Council, Steve Bartlett, Director of Public Works. Tonight's just an informational item for you, and probably at the end of this, maybe get a little feedback from you on how to handle some of this process. And we've talked about this several times, some of you who weren't on council at the time, so I wanted to give you some updates to all these things. So customer service inspections, or CSIs, TCEQ requires all cities to inspect existing and new businesses and perform these customer service inspections. Basically, it identifies potential sources of contamination to the public water system. Currently, it's performed for all new construction. You don't get a CO without us doing a customer service inspection, but that wasn't a for always thing. So we have businesses built in 1987 that did not have that and are still in place today. So we found out through an investigation from TCEQ as they did a water inspection that there is no grandfathering. And I think the city had kind of operated on the 1985 business was grandfathered because it predated a lot of these regulations. And so they certainly informed us several years ago that that was not the case. So we began a program as part of an agreed order. They issued us a rather significant fine that we were able to negotiate way down, fortunately, after many months. But part of that agreed order is we developed a new ordinance, which I'll show you in a second and remind you of, but also that we would begin getting all these customer service inspections done. So council helped us by hiring 3 vendors that do this, and they're out on the streets doing these inspections now. Sorry, I'm not updating my thing here, am I? So we have these 3 firms that are helping us do this. There is a total of 1,502 inspections that are needed when we started this and quantified it. We've completed, and this is last week's data because this changes every day. 341 of those are completed. The rather shocking part is 330 failed. So we have a 97% failure rate on the businesses that we inspect, meaning that they have some form of deficiency in their cross-connection controls. So we are working individually with those customers to upgrade their facilities one by one. So what does that mean? What is a failure? So it can be something as significant, and in many cases, they don't have a backflow preventer outside behind their meter. And if you'll kind of start watching, you see these things appearing everywhere now. Some of them are covered by pretty fake rocks. Some of them are wrapped in insulation, but they're just some piping. Then inside their facility, though, for example, if you're a restaurant and you have a soda fountain, like this example, those have a backflow preventer inside of them. And I don't know the percentage, but it's very high. Most of them are sold with a backflow preventer that is not testable. And so I'm not sure why, but TCEQ decided and issued an opinion that these backflow preventers have to be testable. So all these folks are having to upgrade the backflow preventer just in their soda dispensing machine. And it's not a pleasant pleasant thing for them. Things like mop sinks have to be protected. So you can have a hose in a mop sink and we turn the water off and it sucks everything backwards. So all these things, so when I say that they're failing, they're just missing some of these components. So another piece of things they could be missing is not testing their backflow preventers, which we'll talk about in a moment. Realize that under TCEQ regulations, non-compliance with all this ultimately is supposed to end in water shutoff because their footprint is that we protect the water system. That's our job. So I think in their vernacular, shut off tomorrow would be correct. We don't operate that way. We work with our customers and try to get this done as quickly and efficiently as we can. So we do have a cross-connection ordinance, and again, as part of our agreed order with TCEQ, we created an additional chapter or additional section in Chapter 106 that regulates backflow protection. It basically describes the plumbing requirements and the different kind of facilities you have to have. For example, the mop sink, for example, the hose bib. It does require annual inspections of backflow devices of a few types that are inspectable. And then it allows, now allowed us penalties for noncompliance, and before that we didn't have a way to have penalties. So what are cross-connection devices? What are typical? So your upper left-hand corner is a big boy that you would have, for example, at the hospital would look like this. It's a large line. Basically, it's a one-way valve. Things can come into the business, but it cannot go out. Right below that is a simplified version that you'll see at virtually every restaurant and office building that you go to. That's the same version, but both of those are reduced pressure zone backflow preventers, RPZs. You know, engineers, we love to abbreviate everything. So it's RPZs, and that's what every single business has got to retrofit and install if they don't have one, generally right behind their meter or before their first fixture of use. So that's a lot of what's going on, and a lot of the failures are because they haven't had those. There are other kind of backflow devices that are appropriate for irrigation, double check valves, and even that one on the very right is a little thing you screw on your hose bib. And you're supposed to have those on all your hose bibs on a business, so that things cannot go backwards. Well, that's a $5 piece at Lowe's. So not all of these are significant. Some of them are. So again, I told you that part of the concern is not just the missing devices, but is the annual testing. So we now work with a firm we have for about 1.5 years who helps us do the administrative part of this. So they take over, they send out notices, a 30-day notice, a 15-day notice. You've got to have your backflow preventer tested. They give them all the information. We provide lists of testers, and it's very, very, very automated, and it really has helped us tremendously on the administrative end of notifying our customers to do this. These notices do go to the customer of record, and that's important in a discussion we're going to have in just a second. It does not go to anybody other than who signed for the water account. In other words, who pays the water bill is the responsible customer. So there is a 30-day notice, there's a 15-day notice, and then ultimately, if we have to move to turning off the water for noncompliance, there is a formal 10-day notice that's sent out, and it literally says we're going to turn your water off in 10 days. And so those are all sent out, and that's done by certified mail. Realize that any contact with city staff outlining a schedule or a plan of action or some can delay this water shutoff. In other words, so we're not just being blind and mailing out letters. So if you contact us, if you say, I can't get a plumber out here for 5 weeks, or we've got parts ordered, or this is where we are, then we work with everybody custom. We don't go shut things off. And obviously, we use very prudent judgment. We're not going to turn off a nursing home, and that's the truth. In your ordinance, in Chapter 106, we wrote some provisions that allow the city to go and test or install facilities and then back charge them. So now we're not arguing about whether you're protecting the water, we're arguing about money, but we're able to keep a nursing home open or a hospital or whatever. So we do use some prudent judgment, and I'm not going to say that would apply to everybody, but in things where there are innocent people involved, living in a hotel, living in a nursing home, we wouldn't turn their water off, simply put. We would work with them to fix it some way or another. So, and that's an important, because a lot of people did not understand that there are provisions where we can help them. So let me tell you some of our notification hurdles. And again, the customer who signed up for the water service is responsible. And I know this is a lot of language here, but I wanted to run through with you why we're having compliance issues. So first case would be an owner receives a letter but takes no action and claim they never received the notice. Since COVID, our certified mail is not always signed by a recipient. Things have changed in the green card mail, so we'll get back a lot of them that aren't signed at all. So we really can't say you got it. So we struggle with that a little bit. A lot of these, significant number of these buildings are tenant-owned. They're tenant businesses. And they receive the notice, but they think the owner is responsible, and a lot of times that's the case. But they just dismiss it, so they don't call, they don't do anything, and we get down to the wire and they say, well, I just rent. Another one is the tenant receives it and sends it to the building owner because they know that's what they need to do with no response. Or they may send it to the property manager who then sends it to the building owner. And why is that all important? Because there's time. All that is time. And so we're on a very short time frame when we're mailing these things, and some of these are months worth of communication tasks. So it puts them over our time limit and causes everybody a little bit of angst. We do have customers with P.O. boxes that are not checked regularly. We have customers that are out-of-state corporate entities, and so surprisingly, a lot of our large commercial businesses, retail businesses, the water bill goes out of state, and it's paid out of state. So that notice goes to the out-of-state payor, and that communication isn't always made back to the business location here in town. Or if it is, there's a huge lag in all that timing. So. We recently worked with Walmart, and Walmart, by the way, is great. Walmart has good facilities. They test them annually. But we went through a missed test date with Walmart on a couple of new ones out at their little fuel station out there. And as we finally worked with the managers, and it took hours, this took hours of discussion, we realized it went from here to here, but Walmart corporate hires a company who hires contractors, who then hires a plumber to test it, who then finds one locally to do it. And, so there's this chain that takes months sometimes to do. So Walmart reacted very quickly and solved the problem, and I want you to know that. But that's an example where if we send it to Walmart, it's got to go through a roundabout process. So we struggle with that because, again, timing is not on our side. So our testing and installation hurdles. So a lot of these folks don't have the backflow preventer like we talked, and that'll be one item on their customer service inspection list. You need to put that in. It quite honestly is probably the big piece financially of what's on there. And the customer doesn't know what to do, what it is, how do I get it, and so we work with them to try to give them a list of people who can install it. And it's a plumber activity. All plumbers can install them, but we try to help guide them. Sometimes the customer says, I just can't afford the cost of the testing, and it's $125, $175 to test it each year for each device. Installation can be $1,000 up to $10,000, and some of them even more as we get into some installations require significant site construction. We have had some that have had to cut out their whole parking lot and reroute a water line because their water meter, old school Nacogdoches, the water meter was in the middle of the parking lot. Go figure, and they can't put the backflow preventer there, it'd probably get bonked by a car. So they have to reroute things, and so $10,000 may not touch it. Some of our own old buildings here are arduous, as you can imagine. Adding backflow preventers where we literally on the sidewalk on a street is tough to do. So we've had some that even installed these on a roof and have creative solutions. So our staff work with them. What that all translates to is there could be some extreme cost in retrofitting these backflow preventers, especially in our older downtown areas. So. Some of them have almost no feasible installation. City Hall was a good example of ones where we've struggled with how to do this. I will tell you there are other provisions, but it requires us to protect almost every device inside if we can't have the major device outside. So we have to have a bunch more backflow prevention and cross-connection control inside a building. But again, our folks are well-versed. They're all of our staff we have about 5 or 6 that are licensed for CSI inspections and several that are even licensed to test these backflow preventers. So they're very knowledgeable, and we try to help folks work through these. But I want you to know these are all the hurdles that we go through. So why don't they get the letter and just go do it? Because they struggle with all of these items. So we just had some suggested actions, and I'd appreciate some of your feedback on. So we have a list we create, and just to simplify things, about the 15th of every month now we're creating a list of customers that have pending water service turnoffs, which means they've been notified and notified and notified. We've had no response. Again, remember, if they respond to us, they won't necessarily be on that list. We're working with them. These are folks who have zero response to us. So the question is, do we want to spend time and money to hunt down the building owners? Sometimes the building owner is an estate out of Arizona, and to find out who the responsible parties are, and the person we're dealing with is just a tenant. Again, in the eyes of the state and TCEQ, the tenant signed the customer agreement and is responsible for it, but yet they never intended to have capital expenditures on improving a building. So we haven't always spent the hours and hours to hunt down a remote building owner, but maybe some corporation out of somewhere. We could provide the testing of all existing devices. We could do the testing, have staff. We could do it with even outsourcing it, with some vendors to do all this. I'll give you some of our smaller water supply corporations here in the county test all the backflow preventers for their customers. They have a much smaller pile than we do to do that, as you can see. We're going to have 1,500 of those annually. It'd be a couple of people ongoing process year round. So that's an option that we could start to do that, and we would avoid the TCEQ fines for not having this done. We can also wait longer between our 15-day letter and the 10-day notice. The 10-day notice is the notice telling them they have 10 days. So we can have a 30-day letter, a 15-day letter, and we can have a longer duration. Because I think you're going to begin to hear from your constituents and business owners that, man, the city sent me a letter, I didn't see it, now they're fixing to turn my water off, and there's a lot of black eye problems here. And so we're trying to avoid that. And again, I don't want you to think by any means that we are not trying to individually work with every customer. But when you have 1,500 folks and some won't even call you back, it becomes difficult. So we're looking for a little guidance from y'all, a little how to balance this. We want you to know that there ultimately will have to be some people that get their water turned off to probably have a visit with us. And so, but I'd like to get your feedback. I can provide you this list in the middle of the month because you may know Steve or Bill or Bob and you can help talk to them. All of y'all deal with local businesses in town like we do. And we do that already. I say, I'm going to call Mr. So-and-so up. I know him. I go to church with him and say, what's wrong? So maybe you can do that. It's not your full-time job. It's difficult for even us as senior staff to do that. But we think if we distribute it, maybe to NEDCO, maybe through the chamber, supply you guys with a list, you'll at least know it's coming. Again, the plea is call us, talk to us, work out a solution with us. Let us document some timing. And if you say, hey, I'm underway and 6 months go by, we probably have another prayer meeting coming with them. But if you would like that level of detail, I don't know if you want to get in the weeds that much with it, but this would be every month. The list I just produced and showed Mario and staff had about 50 folks on it just this month that were pending turnoff. So there's a lot to go through there and weed. So anyway, give me some guidance. Give me some ideas on how you think we ought to handle this. I think it's going to be another 1.5-year process to 2-year process, and it's probably going to be a little bit of a struggle. So anyway, appreciate after public comment, any questions I can answer for you.
Great, Steve, thank you. Any comment from the public? Okay. Council, Mr. Anderson?
No, I would, as you all have done, I think by policy, I would tend to try to give people as much chance to come in compliance as we reasonably can. But I do know that TCEQ does not like that very much, or they prefer otherwise anyway. Is there really much leeway to do more than you have been as far as notice?
So, Mr. Anderson, what we're at risk is, and we have been inspected again, and we've been given a list, hey, show me these 10 people, show me their customer service inspections and their backflow preventer annual test results. Mm-hmm. And we never have 100% success with that. It gets written up, and we try to mitigate that before it becomes a fine. The one that caused the big fine we talked about they came in with 129 on a list. I think they sat in a motel with the Yellow Pages that night and came in, and we couldn't cure all that. It took 6-9 months to cure that. Yeah. And so the answer to that is we're always going to be subject to them saying you're not done, you're not caught up. Realize getting all the businesses to install is one thing we started out talking about. The other piece is annual testing. I mean, I have several of those at my facilities, and I have to remember to get the tester out there and do it. So we're always going to have people that are delinquent in that test. Good people who care, but there could be communication. So yeah, I think if we go too long, what I'm telling you is we will probably be subject to fines periodically depending on the temperature of TCEQ when they come to inspect us.
Effectively, from my understanding, the only way that we could ensure customer compliance is to do the testing in-house or hire a firm to do that.
I think that's
And to do
best
it
said.
in-house would require basically employing 2 licensed plumbers full-time.
It's, they are certified backflow testers, and like I said, we could do that with an outsource or do it with an in-house, but yes. A lot of the, not a lot, some of these are inside a facility. The other part of this is when you test a backflow preventer, you have to turn the water off during the test. So a restaurant has to close, car wash has to close, a lawyer's office has to close during the test. And well, for some of them, that's a significant impact. So a private tester, a lot of times will do that in the evening or at night or after peak hours. And so it would have to be coordinated, and I would say 8 to 5 probably doesn't fit that model. So
Yeah,
it would be some considerations of how to do it.
Would there be any cost savings to the customer for the city to handle that on a, just as on a contractual basis with the testing firm?
You know, Mr. Anderson, I don't actually know, because I don't think we put a pencil to that option. It was a concept that came up when we started preparing this to talk to you, is what's another solution?
Yeah.
And it would be to do, if that's something you'd like us to investigate, we can investigate that.
I'm just curious.
And just kinda see what the-
whether, doing it in bulk, whether there would be some
Yeah.
economies of scale there that might help on the customer end and help the city maintain that compliance.
Well, we can look from a full-time employee version and a contractor version of those and just see kind of what
Because
those
I know
costs
we'd
would
have
be.
to
So-
pass that expense on to the
Absolutely.
customers.
Yeah, absolutely.
Obviously, but.
So, but I haven't, we have not put a pencil to it.
Okay.
All right, thank you. Ms. Fisher?
Your note under the wait longer between 15-day letter and 10-day notice, the TCEQ promotes immediate turnoff. Oh, you were on the right one.
Oh,
Go back. There you go.
oh, there it is.
What do you mean by immediate turnoff?
So if the day after your test has expired, you technically, if you ask them, they would say it needs to be severed from the water system because the test isn't updated. So in other words, they don't have a grace period. They don't have a grace period as part of the code.
But we do the 30-day.
So before the test anniversary is up, we're sending them advance warning letters so that they remember, which is
Okay.
something we didn't do, y'all, till we got this service. And by the way, the service is no cost to us. And it's great. They mail the letters. Why do they do it at no cost? Because they charge $11 and something per test. In other words, when a tester tests your backflow preventer, he turns the results in through through cloud, through online, and there's an $11 charge to the tester, which most likely is passed to the customer, absolutely. And they do all the paperwork, all the letters, they give us lists, they notify us who's deficient. It's wonderful, because for $11 a meter, I don't think we can do it in-house. So it's a great relationship. So, but I think TCEQ would say the day that it expires, technically, you're non-compliant.
And how does our timeline line up with the day that it expires? Like our 30-day, 15-day, 10-day
Yeah,
notice?
so 30 to 45 days, because we're doing it kind of in monthly batches, so we're always that or advance of that. We're sending letters out, so at least a couple of months, a month and a half in advance, they're noticed, your test is coming up, you need to get it tested, test is coming up, and then we're saying the 10-day notice is when it's after it's expired, and we usually will send it, so.
Okay, and it's the final 10-day or your water's gonna be
Yeah,
shut off.
when you signed up for water service, if you read that really tiny print at the bottom, and it says you will do backflow preventers, blah, 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 and it says that we will give you 10 days notice before we shut your water off. That's where the 10-day notice comes from. It's part of your customer service agreement.
Okay, I mean, I don't, my inclination is to say not to wait longer. It seems like, particularly given the fact that any sort of contact and communication will work, seems generous on the part of staff, in my opinion.
And we're hopeful that TCEQ, if they come in, and we can show them, hey, we've inspected them, we've contacted them, they've given us a plan of action, maybe waiting on parts, that carries a lot more weight
Yeah.
than us going, well, gee whiz, we didn't know.
Right,
So that's why we're taking that approach, plus we don't want to turn folks off.
right. I'm with Councilmember Anderson on I would be interested to hear more what providing testing for people would look like.
Okay.
And, I mean, in terms of efficiency for the customer, but also administrative burden on the city.
Okay,
Yeah, that's I wouldn't mind getting a list.
Yeah,
If
I
we
think
could help.
I'd like to help with the
Yeah.
list.
Okay.
Yeah. Ms. Bellinger?
Sorry.
Sorry, I skipped.
Okay. So you said this month we have like 55 or something, and I'd be happy to have a list too. What percent of those do you think are related to communications? What percent of those, and what percent do you think are related to the fact that they don't have the money, or, I'm just trying to get a gauge, because there's so many moving parts in this.
Sure. That list is the ones who have a backflow preventer and haven't tested it. So, we think the money is probably a very insignificant, if any, part, because most of them have one, for the most part. Walmart has 4, but most of them have one. So $150, I don't think's the huge hurdle. I think a lot of it is, bluff. They believe we're bluffing, and so they're ignoring us. I think sometimes, I went to visit all the 129 that we had when we got fined, some of them 3 or 4 times. Literally, I went into one of them, on his desk was 2 of these letters stacked up unopened, one with the green card torn off. I don't know how I cure that. So I think communication is partially the problem. That's why on here I said, and this was suggested to the old guy, but maybe we need more social media coverage. I mean, we've been to the newspapers, we've been on TV about it, and we can do that again. But we're wondering if we just need to do more proactive coverage in the community.
So I don't remember if I talked with you about this, but somebody had talked to me about this problem. Did we? I don't remember, but months ago.
Okay.
And part of the issue, it was definitely communications. They had done everything they were supposed to do, and then there are just so many moving parts in there, and I think it was, I can't remember what it was, but I think it was the tester didn't turn the results
Exactly.
in.
No, that's a great point, and I thought later I should have included that bullet in my presentation. So thank you for saying that, because I forgot to mention it. I had 2 last week who I called, and they're people we know, personal, and I said, "What's the deal?" And they said, "Steve, I had it tested after you called and yelled at me the first time." And I said, "Well, I still don't have the results." And we called the tester, and the tester said, "I don't send the results in until I get paid." So there was a little leveraging going on, and we don't stand in the middle of that. We're not in that sandwich. But sometimes it is the tester not reporting the results. Sometimes I think because it's leverage for payment, and sometimes because I think they just didn't do it. So
So I'm just thinking, I just see it as a systems
Yes.
problem. I mean, we just,
Yep.
look at the entire, and see if we can cut out some of those steps. I mean, I think possibly doing it in-house or
Yeah.
contracting it out might cut through several of those gaps. I mean,
Eliminate the payment issue, certainly.
and-
yeah, no, it would.
If it's just on their water bill,
But
yeah.
it is.
But just anything we can do to cut out those, because you got, like, I think I counted about 8 ways it could fail.
Yes.
I could be wrong, but I think I counted.
It's probably
eight-
right.
8 different ways that it could fail,
probably
all
right.
in that thing, and, we're people, we can screw up in one different way to fail, but.
Well, and this isn't a complaint, but it's eating up a tremendous amount of my staff's time, just chasing these. And that's what we do, but we have 2 people, 3 actually, that work very, very hard on this as a significant part of their day every day. And so, and then I get involved if we've got some larger ones, but.
I think if we maybe have a little, one thing we might want to consider is a little task force that with some of these people involved who can figure out how to simplify that system, or maybe just have some suggestions. Suggestions from me aren't the same as suggestions from people who actually work this whole system to simplify it.
Okay.
And another question I had, so I would just set up a little task force, and I can think of one person right off the bat. I'll give you a name, and I think he could head the task force
Okay.
and do a good job. Because you're spending all this time, and you're going way out of your way to try and help this. So we just need to simplify. The other thing is, do we have the authority to say? I guess this is a question for you, Mr. Kirkland, or maybe, do we have the authority to say, if you don't have it fixed, we're coming out and we're doing it for you, and then we're going to charge you, or we're going to give you the fine? we're gonna give you a fine equivalent to the charge.
The ordinance,
Today.
the ordinance allows for that.
Okay.
It does allow for that.
So, I mean, that might be something to consider, but I'm thinking this little task force, you know, of people who are knowledgeable might really help clear it.
Okay.
Do it. I have a couple other ones, but, you have more, you don't have as many abbreviations as the federal government.
You're
I just want
right.
you to know that.
You're right.
That's it I can think of right now, but
Okay, Mr. Bolden?
Thank you, Mayor. You mentioned most businesses have one backflow and like Walmart have 4. Are you speaking outside backflow?
Mm-hmm. Correct.
And then you mentioned like the soda machine, et cetera. Is that counted another number?
Yeah, that's a separate number. The big backflow preventer is, I guess I was talking about, is
Right.
the outside one, yes, sir.
Okay. But now you stated that the inside also have to be tested correctly?
Oh, if you have a soda machine, for example,
Right,
that one's
yeah.
testable. But the rest of them may not be testable. You just have to have them. I will tell you, TCQ said, if you have the business protected on the outside, in other words, the big backflow preventer, then we probably won't be in your hair on what's inside. That doesn't mean they can't be. But when we were going through this process, that was the checkbox. Do you have it protected outside?
I would be in favor of maybe a couple of employees, city employees,
Okay.
being certified to do this testing. I think that would eliminate a lot of errors.
Okay. Great idea.
Yeah, that or service, yeah, I think that's a
Yeah,
good
we'll
idea
look at
to
both.
look into that.
We'll look at both. Pam's cringing, I'm sure, behind me, but yeah.
Okay.
how'd you know? I watched you do it.
She cringes every time I talk, most of the time, so.
He costs me money every time.
I do. I'm her big money spender.
Thank you for the report.
Well, thank you,
and-
guys.
and
I
for
just
your
wanted to
willingness
share
work.
some of our struggles. By the way, I wanted to add, Mayor, I forgot to say, this is all commercial we're talking about, commercial businesses. We do CSI inspections on your home when we give a CO for a new house, but we don't do backflow preventers at residences. So none of this applies to a residence. So, all right, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to 8E, consider the adoption of an ordinance amending chapters 1874 and 86 of the City of Nacogdoches Code of Ordinances to update and consolidate alcohol regulations. Community Services Director.
Excuse me, yes, Mayor, Brian Bray, Community Services Director. So this is following the workshop that we just had at the beginning of this evening's session, where we are requesting the adoption of ordinance 1827, alcohol at city facilities, and the deletion of section 7462 of chapter 74, and section 8626 of chapter 82. And what you have on the screen is the proposed ordinance that we just discussed. There's no changes from what we previously talked about. So Mayor, I'd be happy to answer any questions, concerns after public comment.
Okay, good deal. Any public comment? Okay. Council, start with you, Ms. Bellinger.
So one of my concerns is I have been in college towns where things were not as family friendly as so that I'm just throwing that out as a concern. So I'm hoping that as you think through some of the areas, like for example, you could limit, we're only gonna have beer, we're not gonna have, and we're not gonna do it before noon or before, for just to try and keep the town less, of the college, whatever. You've been in towns where, people
Yes,
are always
ma'am.
walking around with open drinks and everything. Just to think about how you might limit this, even for your own protection, so that people say, why, you made the choice on this variable, not on this variable, just to start doing that. And basically, that's what I said, before. So I hope you all do that. I'm not opposed to it. I think it would be helpful to talk with people about it and get their feedback. But you already know my concerns, and I hope you figure them out.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Bolden.
Thank you, Mayor. You know my concern too, but I really have an issue with alcohol beverages in family-friendly parks. I just can't get past that. That's all I have to say.
It seems like we've been kind of doing it this way, even though we've not been following our ordinance. How often do you have people make a request that would violate us, like for the church or for doing something in a family event? Are there times that we've turned those kind of things down?
The first one that really came to attention was the Old Town Rig Down. So we haven't had, in the time that I've been here, we haven't had requests for events like we're talking about being able to permit for Festival Park or a museum. The items on the square, Festival Park, CVB, the Literary Ball at the library, which is a fundraiser for the Friends of the Library. Those are really there are a few other exceptions, but those are the types of events that we've had requests for sale or consumption of alcohol, and not many others. So we don't have many on an annual basis that are requesting this. This was just so that we had a process to review them.
And I think we would want to scrutinize them. I think you're hearing from all of us that we would
Yes, sir.
certainly want to scrutinize those things. And I thought it was our understanding that the Old Town Rig Down was not requesting alcohol.
And no, sir, they have not requested it, but this was, in that staff level, what I was, kind of talking about when fire, police, public works, parks get together and we try to figure out what are potential issues. That was one of them that we raised was, should they come back, not they have asked, but should they come back and ask for this, how do we address it? And that's when we realized that there was the problem.
Okay, great. Ms. Fisher?
Yeah, I think what you said, Mr. Bray, just now is helpful, that having this ordinance is just providing a process by which city staff can determine whether to issue permits or whatever. It's not blowing the top off and saying, we're gonna have like keggers in a park at like noon when there are children, for example. And so from my perspective, providing a process to do that and knowing that there are multiple city departments involved, taking into account all of these different concerns, including public safety, and especially now after having heard from council concerns about families and children events. I feel comfortable with adopting the ordinance given all of that. And I think that something else is that was mentioned earlier when we were in the work session about this, but that there are state law limits that really cabin the types of events and the times and the places that maybe we aren't aware of or the public isn't aware of that might be stoking the fear of like, oh, well, now it's just going to be an all-out 24/7 party.
And this ordinance also doesn't talk about going from Festival Park with your beer and strolling through downtown.
Right.
Because this is for sale on premise. So this would still be a defined area. If it's a festival downtown, it would be defined from, Mound Street to North Street and, along Main, or, it's a very specific region, and it doesn't allow people to go outside of that region without being in violation of state law.
Yeah. I think it's a responsible thing to do, to have a process in place. And, the city has you guys hired for a reason, to be able to make these kinds of calls, these judgment calls, and so I'm comfortable with it.
Janderson?
Yeah, and I think it's good, again, to have the process, and especially one that brings us into compliance with TABC, which we obviously have not been, as you explained. I think some of the minutia of it is more appropriate as policy, and I think getting public input on some of that is certainly appropriate, but I think keeping that as a policy issue and keeping the ordinance as proposed is, in my opinion, the way to go.
Can I
Yes,
just
sir.
say one more thing? I really have one question. This ordinance basically states that the permit can be issued by one person, correct?
So the request to TABC comes from the city manager's office. So there's a group that meets to look at the event as a whole, and then the recommendation from that group is passed along to the city manager's office. And then that is the office that has to submit it to TABC for approval.
And that's the difference in the past, because at one time, the city councils made those decisions.
So the process was still the same on the backside, so there was still that group that met with the event promoter. And then that event promoter would come to city council to request permission to have the event in Festival Park where consumption or sale was allowed.
So that's,
So your role in that was saying, yes, this event promoter can do alcohol sales in Festival Park.
right. But that's no longer the
But we
case.
haven't done that in how long, is that right? We've kind of gotten away from doing it that way.
Last year you did for the Full Moon Concert Series, and that was the first time in quite some time.
But like for Wine Swirl,
No, sir,
we didn't.
we did not.
But the ultimate yes or no comes from TABC.
Yes, ma'am, that is correct.
Thank you.
Okay, is there a motion on E?
I'll move that we approve E.
Okay, do I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, any discussion? Those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. All right, we'll move to F. Consider a contract amendment to extend the current Mr. Bray, thank you. Current electricity retail sales agreement with Texas General Land Office, GLO, for a period to expire on December 31, 2023. Director of Finance.
Mayor, council, this is the first of a couple of items, and you'll notice that this is a little strange for us. The way the electric market is right now, I do not have a hard and fast rate for you. They are changing, actually, I've got a couple of different quotes today. We didn't know until this afternoon, about 2:30 or 3 o'clock, what we were gonna present to y'all. So F is the item that we are going to present to extend our current contract. To give you a little bit of background, the electricity market was deregulated in 2001. At that point, the city joined a aggregation group, cities, what was it? It was CAP, Cities Aggregation Power Project, something like that. And so it was about 150, 160 cities that joined together to purchase electricity under the new deregulated market. We were with them from 2001 through 2014. 2014, we changed and moved to the GLO. The state allowed municipalities to purchase through the state power program, which services school districts, and they allowed cities to purchase with them. The good thing about that at that point was we were exempted from gross receipts tax that's passed through on our electricity bills. And at the time was about $100,000, $150,000 a year that we were saving by purchasing through the state. And so the city did opt to move from the aggregation group in 2014 to the GLO program. Under the GLO program for the last 8 years, we have enjoyed about 3 to 3.5 cent electricity. Well, as you know, the electric market is no longer in a 3 and 3.5 cent market, and so our legislatures a couple of years ago decided that as of December the 31st of 2023, municipalities can no longer participate in the state power program. So it's going to continue, but we are not able to participate, and so that's a hard drop for us. So they have allowed us to extend any contracts that we've had with them through December of 2023. And so tonight we are going to ask that we do extend that contract with the GLO so that we can retain that gross receipts tax savings. Understanding the market is crazy right now, this is probably not the best time for our contract to come due. the volatility of the market has been crazy. Over the last couple of weeks, I have spoken with a number of entities, and the way that the market is going, none of them are comfortable holding a price for us. In the past, we would have come to you tonight with a price, and they would have held it till tomorrow where we could sign the contract. No one is willing to do that right now because the volatility is crazy. As an example, last night, the electric provider that quoted us the rate at 2 o'clock this afternoon, yesterday was like 0.3 of a cent different yesterday, just in a 1-day period. I do have the executive director of what is now Texas Coalition for Affordable Power, which is CAP, which we used to belong to. They changed their name. And so she's going to talk to you in a minute, I think, on the public comment side, just kind of a little bit of background of what we're looking at in this market. Understanding that she was an option. Unfortunately for CAP at this part, or TCAP at this point, the GLO rate did come in a little bit lower. So what is the rate? So as of 2 o'clock this afternoon, the rate was quoted at 9.84, but with the amount of the GRT pass-through that we will not be paying, the actual effective rate is 9.559. So that would be for the time period from June the 1st of 22 through December the 31st of 23. At that point, we have to leave the GLO. We will not have an option to renew again, and so we will be coming to y'all in the next couple of meetings to start planning for what we are going to do in 2024. And one of those options that we really are probably going to come and ask, to ask is to rejoin the aggregation group. And so what that will allow us to do is to start having those 2024 energy prices locked in sooner rather than later. And so tonight, I can tell you that as of 2 o'clock, the rate was 9.559. But by the time we sign this contract in the morning around 9 or 9:30, when they give us a new rate, it could fluctuate. And so, like I said, it went up 0.3 of a cent overnight last night. It could go up, it could go down. If we all pray really hard, maybe it'll go down. But we won't know exactly. And so the extension that you had in your packet did not have the kilowatt hour amount there. So when I was speaking earlier about the mid-year financials, understanding that we're currently paying 3.45 cents per kilowatt hour, and we're looking at 9.559 for the next 18-month, 19-month period. So there is going to be a significant increase in the amount of our electricity bills over the next year and a half. Now, does that mean it's at exactly a three times increase? No, this is just on the energy charges. A lot of our electric bills is a pass-through for the TDSP charges. Now, keep in mind, all of the ERCOT, everybody's going to be raising rates too, but what we're looking at tonight is just the energy piece. And so what we will be doing before probably, I don't know that we'll have an opportunity to get you good numbers by the 17th. I'm going to try to go ahead and bring to you what I think we're going to need for a budget amendment to finish out this fiscal year under the new rates. Because, of course, the budget was prepared under the assumption that we were going to be able to extend somewhat close to where we were. And unfortunately, that had not happened. But so at this point, I think, it's a gamble. I mean, we can sign a 19-month contract, extend it, and we sign it tomorrow morning and it's 9.5 cents, and then Friday morning we get up and something's happened drastic and it's 7 cents. I don't see it happening. It could happen, but it could also be 12 cents. I will tell you that we got several ranges, so I asked them if we don't extend the full time, let's talk about extending it through the end of this year. And we're up to 15 cents. So it was a significant increase doing a 5-month, 6-month, 7-month contract as opposed to the 19-month that will take us to the end of our ability to stay with GLO. So I can't tell you right now the exact impact, but we will be bringing those numbers as we work through the budget for next year and the budget amendment for this year. Just understand it's going to be a significant increase over what we have been paying. So, great, good news. Always full of good news.
So all that we're doing in F though is just extending
The existing contract.
the existing contract and locking this rate?
Whatever the rate is in the morning. It currently is 9.559. Whatever the rate is in the morning is what we will be locking in until December the 31st of 23. Yes, sir. So I will answer any questions, but if you are going to have public comment, I think the executive director of TCAT would like to speak.
Certainly, thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Mayor, Council, thank you so much for giving me a few moments of your time to talk. My name is Margaret Summereve. I'm the Executive Director of the Texas Coalition for Affordable Power. We have been helping Pam get prices. Just to give you a little bit about the market, I would love to give you, these are the reasons the market is doing what the market's doing. Unfortunately, we can't give you any of those reasons. We're not sure what the market's doing. The experts aren't even sure what the market's doing. There's just panic and fear right now. And with panic and fear comes, we're just going to raise prices. And even today, when I was getting Pam a price at 2 o'clock, in a 30-minute period, the electric market changed and prices went up almost a penny. Again, as she had stated, nobody wants to guarantee a contract. I will say, pre the winter storm, easily, there was a market price, close of business. It wasn't going to change until, you could lock in a contract. You didn't have to worry. The winter storm, what's going on with that still and what ERCOT's doing there, the fear of what may be coming out of the Public Utility Commission and ERCOT along, and these are just suppositions. Again, we're not quite sure where this fear is coming from. And then just what's going on with Russia and Ukraine, we think people are panicking. And so right now, having to be in the energy market to buy electricity, it's just an awful time to buy it. We support the decision to go with General Land Office. TCAP has tried for years to get the legislature to exempt all cities from the gross receipts tax. They have not been open to that idea. They've only allowed cities that are part of the General Land Office to have that. But again, that program is going away at the end of 2023. I will tell you right now, we're buying power for our members. We have 169 members throughout Texas. We're looking at the 2024 price in the high 4-cent range, so that when you look further out to buy the contracts, the gas prices are much more secure, stable, the market's much more stable, and so those prices looking further out, much better than what you're looking at the immediate right now. So, if you have any questions.
That's a contract that you buy today?
So, when Nacogdoches left TCAP at the time, what we did at the time was we did a blend and extend contract. Prices weren't they were okay at the time, but what we did is we went out and got a contract and said, okay, take what we currently have, extend our contract a little bit more, blend the lower rate with the current rate, and that's what's called a blend and extend. At the time, it was a really good contract. Unfortunately, what also happened was it also lengthened our contract through the end of 2017. What happened that no one saw at the time was fracking, and energy prices fell. And we are sitting in that contract, and council's going, why are we sitting in this contract when the market's doing this? So one of the things that we realized is that if you're in long-term contracts, you're out of the market. That could be good, that could be bad. It could be good if prices go nowhere but up. It could be bad if the bottom falls out and you're sitting in a 9-cent contract and rates are sitting at 3 cents. So we changed our purchasing strategy a couple years ago. And so what we're doing now is instead of trying to figure out that one perfect day, and I think Pam will attest to this, when you're looking at one day to buy your power and you have to do it, you're up against a wall and you don't have any choices. You don't get to take advantage of anything that may happen on Friday or may happen next week. And so what we're doing is we're purchasing 1/12 of our power every month. So it averages out the cost over the year. We combine those costs together, and then we have one cost per year. And then we're doing that rolling forward 5 years instead of having a 5-year contract. What that allows is that we're far enough out previous to the contract that if the market starts changing, we can turn it into a longer-term contract. But also it allows us to be in the market to take advantage of the pricing if it dips. And then the other thing it allows is for some reason, some month is just crazy. And which last year it was February. We did not buy any power in February. We waited a couple months and then caught up and then got some really good prices after that. Right now, we are buying power right now, but we're buying it for 2024. If the council decides, that agrees that to move into TCAP, even though we've purchased some in 2024, we would be able to roll and catch Nacogdoches up and purchase the rest of 24 at that point.
So what would the price be if it was a contract out into 24?
Right now, we've only purchased part of it, but they're, like I said, they're in the high 4s for our members. And right now, our price for our members in 23 are in the mid-4s. We're at 4.5 for their 23 rate. But we also think that in the future, what we're going to see, and again, this fear, it would be nice to say there's a shortage of gas. There's not, it's just fear. We think moving forward that the next great thing after fracking is going to be battery backup, and that's really going to add a lot to the grid, and as well as the solar and additional wind coming on, that we should start seeing prices drop with new technology as well. The other thing it does, which I'll mention real briefly, is that when you do buy long-term contracts, like 5 or 6 or 10 years, the generators put what's called price adders in there because they don't know what the price is going to be for the electricity that they're going to buy in that 9th or 10th or 5th year. So they put a little cushion in there. By only buying 1 year at a time, we've taken all of that out. So you're not paying that insurance for that. And that also saves our city's money as well. So I know that's a lot.
Any questions?
Well, I have questions, but they may not pertain.
Oh, okay.
Mine are more
any-
opinions about the justification for detaching municipalities from the GLO buying system, but I don't know if that's.
Actually, the entire general land office selling electricity is actually going away at the end of 23. What the law did was get rid of GLO completely as a electricity provider, but it allowed, and we fought, and TCAP did lobby and tried to get, again, it's not fair that cities are tax exempt, but we're paying a gross receipts tax. And so what the law did in 2019 is, even though the GLO program is going away, school districts are still tax exempt from gross receipts tax. But now all cities have to pay gross receipts tax.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
They have a better lobby.
Well, cities are not well received in Austin, and yeah, so anything cities have wanted over the last couple sessions, it's been almost a hard and fast, no, we don't really care. The cities are the evil, bad people, and it's all the city's fault for all the problems in Texas.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they want to run the business. They want to run city business.
Mm-hmm.
They're at war on against
Yes.
municipalities.
We thank you for being with us tonight.
You're welcome.
Thank you for the information.
So with
Let
what
me-
she was
Any
going
other
over-
comments, I'm sorry, from the public? All right. Oh, excuse me, thank you. Okay.
So with what she was explaining about the 2024 energy, just as an example, she did give us a price today on this same contract period that we're looking to extend with the GLO. And her rates were right in line with the GLOs before the gross receipts are removed. So it was a 9.8 cent quote as well. It's 9.5 after you move the GRT, and so that's why we had that discussion. Even though the rates, when we asked for rates, were the same, taking out that gross receipts makes the effective rate through the GLO lower. And so that's why we're choosing to go that route here. But like I said earlier, we are going to come back to you in a future meeting and ask to rejoin the aggregation group so that they can begin the process of procuring electricity for us in '24. And so that's when you were asking her, what are those rates right now? So that we can look forward to '24 rates in the 4 and 5 cent range and not the 9. So this is a gap to get us to that newer contract, and so that they can purchase that electricity instead of 1 5-year period, actually be able to do that on a rolling basis for us and see those savings. So that will be an item that will be coming to y'all soon, is to go ahead and join so that they can start rolling us into that '24 contract. Because like she said, they've already started purchasing for our '24.
Any other questions or comments? Do I have a motion for F, 8F?
Motion to approve FA.
Second.
8F.
Thank you, sir. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? Those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. All right, thank you. So on G, we'll just pass for now,
And H.
and H, okay? Okay. All right, well, that takes us through our regular session and takes us to our executive session. And so pursuant to Texas Government Code sections 551.087, 551.074, we will adjourn to executive session. Executive session at 8:23 on May the 3rd, 2022. And we, again, section 551.074 and 551.087. And we do have business to consider after the session. As to item 9C, I would make a motion that we negotiate a separation agreement between the city of Nacogdoches and the police chief.
I second the motion.
Second, thank you. Any discussion?
Mayor, you need to authorize your city manager to negotiate that separation.
Okay, I would amend that motion that it would authorize the city manager to negotiate that separation agreement.
Thank you.
Second.
Okay. Any discussion? Those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, same sign. Okay. We also had action on 9B. And do I have a motion on that?
I'll move that Mr. Kirkland's contract is further amended to provide that he is to accrue vacation leave at a rate of 7.6924 hours per day, per pay period, pardon me, starting on April 10th, 2022.
Okay, do I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. Any discussion? Those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. We're adjourned.